say, go big or go home. How do you want to die? Now, my mother-in-law just died yesterday. She died 88. She actually turned 88 in the hospital. Listen, she was surrounded by her family and her grandchildren and the like. Her husband died 30 years ago. She has been an anchor in the family, kept people together, and I can say lots of great things about her, but I will tell you that one of the things that I did admire for her is when her grandchildren were going off to school, and one grandson, particularly I'll use an example of, he goes off to college, Texas Tech. And like most kids that go off to college, they get exposed to different ideas, and like all of us were in our 18s and early 20s, we had the answers to everything, okay? And so she did not, argue. She's like, okay, tell me what you think. And then she would research this and go into deep dives in this and then share different things back, and they would have these conversations grow. And she was open to learning new things too. When once he was saying, the United States government was involved in these things, and she's like, no, we don't do things like this. And then she started researching and was like, oh yes, we do things like this, okay? But the catch was she was open to new ideas, but also open to digging into saying, here's what young people are going through, and here's how I can share wisdom and and here's some things for her grandchildren you need to think about as well. And it was a great example to set, okay? And she has done a great deal to keep the family together over time. Most women, when you're talking about surveys and ask people, most women say they would prefer to die that way, surrounded by their family. When you ask guys how they would like to die, they tend to have things like, in a fight against innumerable odds and, go, in a hail of glory, etc. Another person died this week, and that was Charlie Kirk, okay? And he was 31. Now, I didn't agree with Charlie Kirk on all his political views, and you don't have to either, all right? But when I was a kid, my hero was Alexander the Great. And I thought if Alexander the Great had conquered the world by 30, I could conquer the world for Jesus by 30 as well. And then I turned 30 and decided I needed to change some of my life goals because I just wasn't going to make that one, okay? Charlie Kirk died telling people about Christ and died standing up for what he believed in. There's worse ways to go, okay? So I'd just like to point this out because in this particular class, here's what we're up with. Isaiah 38, 1 through 5. In those days, Hezekiah became ill, and he was at the point of death. And the prophet Isaiah, son of Amoz, came to him and said, this is what the Lord says. Put your house in order, because you're going to die. You will not recover. By the way, just as a side point, many people say, I just want God to speak to me. I want God to show me. If you actually look at Scripture, when God tells people, okay, here's what it is. It's not what you see today. Go buy that big house you're thinking about. Yes, God wants you to have that Lear jet. No, it's, you're going to die. Get ready. And Hezekiah turned his face to the wall and prayed to the Lord. Remember, Lord, I've walked before you faithfully and with wholehearted devotion and have done what is good in your eyes. And Hezekiah wept bitterly. And then the word of the Lord came to Isaiah and he said, go and tell Hezekiah, this is what the Lord, the God of your father David says. I've heard your prayer, seen your tears. I will add 15 years to your life. So let me ask you, if God appeared to you this afternoon, after you had gone to Captain D's with your children because you like that senior discount on Sundays that they give, and said, I'm letting you know you got 15 years, what would you do with it? I'm not going to say it because we're going to save time with that video. Many of us in this class are nearing retirement. Work with me here. Work with me here. Okay. Many of you may already be having a toe in retirement. Many of you may have already jumped into the deep end. Okay. But whatever that is, okay, while we should enjoy our senior discounts, we also need to think about what we're going to do this year, next year, with ever the 15 or whatever years that the Lord's going to give us. As Christians, we should view things differently. In the sense of, hey, what's on my bucket list? And I mean, there's nothing wrong with a bucket list, okay? But we also have to adapt in things. I have kept, for years, 1 million frequent flyer miles stored away on American for all the times I've been traveling and teaching in the summers in Europe and China, because I've had a dream to take my family back to Iran. As a statistician, calculating those probabilities, I'm like, we probably need to use those miles for something else at this time, because I just don't see it happening, okay? So what are we going to use it for? James 4:14 says, what do you know about tomorrow? How can you be so sure about your life? It is nothing more than mist. It appears only for a little while before it disappears. Some of you have had the great fortune of being able to go to Tennessee and the Appalachian Mountains in the fall and in the winter. And there it is called the Smoky Mountains. And it's called that way because in the mornings, this mist forms everywhere, and it looks like everything's just covered in smoke. And when you're hiking the Appalachian Trail, you'll be up there in the morning, and you'll just be looking out, and it's just all there, and then it burns off quickly. And very soon it's gone. And every time we'd be hiking the Appalachian Trail and we'd see that, this verse would come to mind. Psalms 90 and verse 12 says, teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. Most of us have now reached that point in life where we understand that the days are long, but the years are short. And I'm not even going to calculate to you the difference in time between World War I and the 1980 versus 1980 and now, because, well, it's just depressing. Okay, but the catch is, time goes, and we have a different perspective. I am not going to read through all this, and as was pointed out last class, hey, when it's that small, we can't read it anymore. Okay, But let me just read some to this. When Adam had lived 130 years, he had a son in his own likeness, in his own image, and he named him Seth. And Seth was born. Adam lived 800 years and had other sons and daughters. And altogether, Adam lived a total of 930 years, and he died. And when Seth had lived 105 years, he became the father of Enosh, and he became the father of Enosh. Seth lived 807 years and had other sons and daughters. And altogether, Seth lived 912 years, and he died. And there's another 6 verses here going on. When Enoch had lived 65 years, he became the father of Methuselah, and he became the father of Methuselah. He walked faithfully with God 300 years, and he had other sons and daughters, and he died. Okay, so basically, Genesis 5 is they lived, they had kids, they died, end of story. You want to go out that way? We lived, we got married, we had children, we got older, we complained about kids on our lawn, and we complained about what are these shows kids are watching today, like K-pop Demon Hunters, and then we died. Or, well, Acts 13:36, and when David had served God's purpose in his own generation, he fell asleep. What do you want to go out with? What do I want to go out with? And if the second is what we want to go out with, then what plans are we making for that? 2 Timothy 1, verse 7. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. What are examples of going big or going home? When I was in college, I worked with the University Christian Student Center at Tennessee Tech. Now, I've mentioned Tennessee Tech before. It is in the sprawling cultural mecca of Cookeville, Tennessee. It is not the end of the world, but you can see it from there. And I was very excited that this past weekend, Alabama won. This is good. Georgia Tech won. Okay. Texas A&M won. And for you Tennessee fans out there, sorry about your kicker. Okay. For you Georgia fans out there, enjoy. Okay. But most importantly, Tennessee Tech won. Now, you don't understand what that means, but Tennessee Tech means that they now have a 3-0 starting season, which they have not had since 1971. Tennessee Tech used to be an Ohio Valley Conference powerhouse, and when I was in college in the 80s, they had two simultaneous records. The first was they had the highest winning percentage in college football over the course of their entire program. Number two was Alabama. And simultaneously, they held the record for the longest losing streak at 3 years. Okay, so, woohoo, things are going well. So this is a small place, it's a small college, and this is a small Christian student center. But we started Columbia Christian Conference, which became the biggest Christian conference for college ministries east of the Mississippi. Winterfest was started at our church, College Side Church of Christ, and taken over by the youth ministry. And a guy was there called Dudley Chansey, and many of your kids have been to Winterfest. It's big, okay? And it's nationwide. Dudley, being Dudley and only sleeping 3 hours a night, which I hated the man for because he could get so much accomplished, he started a coffee plantation in Honduras. The man has never drunk a cup of coffee in his entire life, and yet only sleeps 3 to 4 hours a night his entire life. I know we're not supposed to hate people, but especially as a college student, I'm up doing all-nighters, doing stuff, and he'd walk in at 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, what are you doing here? Well, I always get up at 4. Oh, really? Well, that's nice. Because the people at Honduras, at Tegucigalpa, the preaching college, needed jobs, he started a coffee plantation to give the Christians in the areas jobs. Okay? Toys for Unwed Mothers, the congregation we're at in Tennessee, where Liesl made her dancing debut. The retired gentleman in that place would build wooden cribs, toys, rocking chairs, and they went to the local hospitals and said, when any woman, unwed mother, is giving birth, please let us know. And they would just show up, she's giving birth, and give her these cribs and rocking chairs and the like, and, just let us know what the church can do for you. One Nation Under God campaign. Well, he's not here. He's not here. But this is from, Tennessee Tech. Cookeville's a small town. College Side was a planned church split from the biggest congregation in town to set up a facility behind Tennessee Tech to serve college students. The biggest congregation in town was Jefferson. It was where the money was. And the smallest congregation in town was Sycamore. Basically, blue-collar people went there. Okay? And one of the men in Sycamore said, God commanded us to teach the gospel to everybody. So we're going to do the One Nation Under God campaign in the 90s. We are going to reach out to every family in America. And this wasn't the rich congregation in this big culting metropolis of Cookeville. This wasn't the educated congregation. This was a small congregation with no money. And they did it because they said, God told us to do it. And if God is for us, who can be against us? These are examples. What can we do? What can we do? What do we offer as more seasoned individuals? Perspective and wisdom that comes from age. When we're young, we all want the same things. There's a music video I'll go to periodically. Okay, now I'm really aging myself. Paula Abdul's The Way That You Love Me. Because it came out when I was finishing up undergraduate, and in it, she sings that it's not your jet, it's not your car, it's not all these things, it's the way you love me, but it's all these images of everything that I wanted at 22. The Porsche, the high-end German camera, the Apple IIe, this new thing called a CD player, okay? And it had a Nakamichi Dragon cassette deck, which was the top cassette deck you could get anywhere. Everybody wanted a Nak Dragon, as an electrical engineer. And I go back and I watch it because now I'm sitting here going, you want a high-end camera? Why? Okay. You want an Apple IIe? Why? Okay. You want to travel? I have now traveled. I've now been in some of the most expensive hotels in the world. And you know what? When you turn the lights off, they all look like Motel 6. And you just want to stay home, okay? All of those things. Nakamichi Dragon, 4 years ago, I had a friend of mine call me and said, hey, I'm cleaning out stuff. I've got a knock dragon. Would you like it? The thing I wanted more than anything. And I'm like, I got rid of all my cassette tapes. I don't need this thing anymore. All those things that seemed so necessary to work your rear end off for and like say, yeah, who cares? That's what we provide. That perspective. When I was first getting out, I was noticing my friends that were graduating, and we talked about we're not going to get caught up in things and buying stuff, and people still did. And I went and talked to a gentleman who was an executive, and I asked his advice, and he goes, oh, I can solve this for you real easy. And I said, what? He says, when you get out, I need you to go buy the most expensive sports car you can afford. I'm like, wait, what? Honestly, he said, just work with me. I need you to go buy the expensive sports car. Make sure it's red, and make sure it has a standard shift. I'm like, okay. And then what? He says, nothing. Just drive it. I'm like, I'm confused. He said, well, you're going to be driving in rush hour traffic in Atlanta. You're never going to get it up to speed. You're just going to be moving up and down that gear shift all day long in bumper-to-bumper traffic. You're also, because you're driving a sports car in red and you're a male at age 24, going to realize one day while you're stuck in traffic that the insurance on that vehicle is more than you're paying for your apartment. And you're going to say, well, this is stupid. And then you're going to say, I need to sell this car. But, oh, now that you've driven it off the lot, it's depreciated 30%. And now you're underwater in it. And so you're stuck with it until you can pay this stuff off. And once you pay it off, you will never be sucked in by materialism ever again. And I'm like, are you sure this works? And he said, work for me. There are two ways to gain wisdom. We can listen to older people who've been there and done that. Or we can beat our heads up against the wall until, oh, that's what they were talking about. Smacks us in the face. One's easier than the other, okay? God sent the Magi to Jesus because the Magi, as Zoroastrian priests, were there to keep that wisdom of the ages going, to point the people to this is the Messiah, to remember those things that might have been forgotten in previous ages. Wall Street Journal, end of this past year, World War III already begun. With Russia's war in Ukraine nearly 3 years old, the Middle East ablaze on multiple fronts, and tensions building up in East Asia, conflicts once thought to be disconnected have merged into what could be the opening shots of a third world war. And young people are worried. Matthew 24. You will hear wars and rumors of wars, but see to it that you're not alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end is still to come. Nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines and earthquakes in various places. I grew up, many of you, in the shade of potential thermonuclear conflict with the Cold War. My grandfather, the girl's great-grandfather, had seen a lot. His father, so my great-grandfather, had fought in the Civil War. My grandfather had seen World War I, World War II, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, and now the Cold War. Let's just say he had a different perspective on things, which was helpful to me as a young person. And that is one thing we can provide. That same article talking about middle age now arrives in your 20s. Stress is making young people feel older with mounting concerns about job security, debt, child care costs, and caregiving. Okay? I saw a report the other day that it said up until the past 15 years, the standard attitude of every high school teenager was boredom. Right? Remember you being in high school? Oh, gotta do this homework, looking at the clock. It's taking so long. Why won't this day end? Today, the standard emotional state of teenagers and young people is anxiety. So how do we help them with that? Because it's the world we gave them. So how do we help them with that? Philippians 4, 11 through 13. I'm not saying this because I'm in need, but I've learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need. I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all this through him who gives me strength. In John 6:43 says, stop grumbling among yourselves. As older individuals, we should have learned by this time there's more to life. Kids, that Nakamichi dragon isn't all it's cut out to be. And I mentioned to you before, in my family, we weren't allowed to complain because there was nothing that we can complain about that our parents couldn't one-up us about. When your dad grew up in the Great Depression, and your mom, when I was 9 and I'm complaining to my mother about something in the kitchen, and she just looked at me and smiled and said, I love you, dear. When I was your age, the Russians were invading and I was being shot at. What are you complaining about? Nothing. I didn't think so. Now go outside and play. Okay? There's a catch here. And part of the issue of anxiety, to be perfectly blunt, is that young people, and adults too, in this country have had it too good. We haven't had to worry about smallpox epidemics and all this, which is why, we have such conflict over vaccines or not. Because a generation ago, it was like, I'll take anything to keep my children from dying. Okay? But now it's a lot safer. All right? We went through multiple world wars. And today, all our conflicts are remote, and a very small percentage of the United States is affected by it. Because we talk about the 1%. Well, less than 1% of the U.S. population is involved or have family in the military. The military is the real 1%. They make the sacrifices so the rest of us can argue about who the 1% is. Okay? And the simple reality is we've got it good. But if you have it that good, you don't realize how good you have it. And so small things can take on big aspects. And it's up to us to do that. But that's the question, do we? Matthew 5:43 and 44. This is what we should be passing on to a new generation. You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those that persecute you. Why weren't you sitting up front where you need to be? 25 years ago when I started teaching this class, I got to this verse, and he was sitting right there. You have heard it said, an eye and a tooth for a tooth, but I say to you, do not resist the one who is evil, but if anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. And he did. It was perfect. I hadn't prepped this. I just walked up to him, and I clocked him, and he goes, you want me to turn the other cheek? And I'm like, yes, there we go. I don't even have to prep this. Now, this is what we're supposed to be teaching young people. And in today's day of social media, are we? How many of you that may have been upset with Charlie Kirk's death, and it was tragic and horrific, posted stuff that didn't necessarily support peace? We should know better. We're the elderly that are supposed to have taken this on and learned from God and pass this on. Romans 12:18, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with all men. If your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he's thirsty, give him something to drink. For by so doing, you will heap burning coals on his head, and do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. I get it, guys. We're human beings and we have emotions. There's a young person who's close to me that when this happened posted something that said, some of you, if you'd been around when Hitler put one on his head, would have been saying, well, he wasn't that bad of a guy. Because you're just making apologies for Charlie Kirk. Now, I could sit here and say, am I being called a Nazi and a fascist? Or I could say, this is what God calls me to respond with. By the way, as a positive note, I'm teaching undergraduates this year, this semester. They're all seniors. I have them both class. I came in the day after this happened. I said, guys, you may agree or disagree with Charlie Kirk. That's not the issue that I'm not worried about. I said, but one of the things that I truly admire about Charlie Kirk is he's going around trying to get people to talk. And I said, so here's what we're going to do in this class. I said, I need you to pair up with somebody you don't know. They all paired up. This is a large class. And I said, here's what we're going to do. For the next 45 minutes, you're going to discuss these two topics. A, what has brought on political violence in this country, and B, what we can do about it. Here are the ground rules. You will listen respectfully to the other person. You do not get to raise your voice. You do not get to interrupt the other person. You can disagree, but you will do it respectfully. And nobody gets to say the following: you are just a fill in the blank. A libtard, a fascist, or what? None. I said, you saying that, I throw you out of class. And I watched in joy as for 45 minutes, 30 students sat there without a phone, because I don't allow phones in my class anymore, and looked each other straight in the eye and disagreed and talked. Okay? We have to be living this stuff ourselves. Numbers 21:5, and the people spoke against God and against Moses and said, why have you brought us out of Egypt to die in the wilderness? There is no bread, there is no water, and we detest this miserable food. Were these adults or teenagers? Because it sure sounds like teenagers. Or younger. I'm sure you've all had this experience. I am a connoisseur of fine broccoli stalks, because neither of my children would eat them. They always wanted the florets. And my wife, being a mother, would cut them off. I, being a father, was like, make them eat it all. That's what my dad made them eat. No, we're cutting them off. And so I got the stalks. I've always had the stalks. I don't know what a floret tastes like. I hear they're nice, okay, but we will see. Okay? But that's, by the way, do you know why fish sticks were made? Because before that, there was only fish. And children didn't want to eat the fish because the head was still on the fish. Ugh, that's yucky. So that's why they were made. Fish sticks were made to help parents get their children to eat. Okay? So the next time you're griping about big pharma, making these foods for us, well, it's not like they're totally out to get us. They're trying to help as well. Fish sticks, the go-to for every parent of young children, that and macaroni and cheese, okay, was made for parents that were pulling their teeth out, going, how do I get this kid to eat some fish? In this example, the Israelites, and just want to run this because it doesn't come through in the translation, just as Lord. It says they complained not against the Lord, Yahweh, but before God, Elohim. In other words, Israel didn't rebel against its personal deity, our God. They rebelled against the very principle of divine authority, because that's the word used in the beginning. Sound like our world today? There's no God. Or if there's a God and he says to do this, I don't agree with that, so therefore I'm going to retranslate the Bible. I'm going to just ignore the Bible. Because I don't accept any divine principle other than me. And I work in an academic environment, and trust me, I live this. People in the ivory tower saying, I don't want anybody over me, period. Okay? But here's something that I do want us all to take personally. Complaining is a moral issue. God miraculously provided food every day, but the people regarded it as miserable. How many times did your children, there's nothing to eat? You open the cupboards, it's full, there's nothing to eat. I bet if God had quit providing food after a day or two, they would have thought it was great food after all. Such is human nature. When the girls were small, I took them to the grocery store for the first time. And we were checking out. And why, and this is what I teach, so I apologize for my profession. At the checkout line, what's down low? Why? Because the kids will see it. Daddy, I want some candy. No, but I want some candy. And as I tell my young people, my students, it's at that point in time that you realize the world is divided into two groups of people. Those without children. Those are the ones standing behind you in line going, When I have children, I won't let them act that way. And those with children, because when you've had enough, the children realize this because they say, you go, I have had enough. And the kid goes, uh-oh, and tries to run away. This is the person in line that trips your child so they can't get away. It's like, get back there and get your spanking, go in there. And you realize it's divided this way. So I take them for the first time. Daddy, I want some candy. No, I want some candy. No, I want some candy. I said, okay, come on. And I left the cart and we went home. And we got home. And they said, what's for dinner? I'm like, nothing. But we're hungry. Too bad. Go to bed. But our stomachs, I'm like, it's okay. Go to bed. And so they went to bed. And everything was fine until Gretchen came home. And my pediatrician wife says, what did the girls have for dinner? I said, nothing. Nothing. And I get this lecture on nutrition and blah, 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 and developmental stages and all this. And I said, hey, do you know how many times I was sent to bed without any supper? And she's like, yes, and look how short you are. And I'm like, that was totally uncalled for, okay? But guess what? The second time I took them to the grocery store and we're checking out, Dad, I want some candy. No, I want some candy. Let's go. Oh, we're good. Okay? It's human nature to complain. And we as marketing professionals set it up to complain. Ladies, you aren't pretty enough. You need fill in the blank, whatever, sir. The shampoo you're using, that was last year's shampoo. It's not good enough. You have to use this year's shampoo or else your skin isn't going to look like a 12-year-old's. Gentlemen, you're not a good enough golfer. You need this new putter. You need these new drivers. You need this new golf ball. You need this. Gentlemen, no, we won't talk about tools because that's perfectly legitimate, and I'm not going to go there. I don't need the 40-volt high-impact deep socket wrench that Rigid now offers when I've got. But yes, I do. I do need it. And there's lots of reasons I can rationalize this. The catch is we do this to make us want this. There's a pattern to complaining, however. It is habit forming. Once you start complaining, it takes a life of its own. And you become really good at it. And you become really good at rationalizing it. I'm not complaining. I'm just being factual. I'm not complaining. I'm just sharing my feelings, and we all have rights to our feelings. I'm not complaining. I'm fill in whatever excuse you want to make, and it's an excuse. You're complaining. And as adults, we should be past this. The tendency among people is to go beyond where one left off the last time, to become more egregious, more outspoken. Rarely does a complaining person become milder in his or her complaints, and complaining becomes self-destructive. Don't believe me? Take a look at social media. Regardless of where you stand politically, how many people, left and right, have lost their jobs because they complained about stuff in a way that they shouldn't have? And then we're shocked. Well, this is a country that has free speech. That's right. You have the freedom of speech. You do not have the freedom from consequences. But again, that shows us something too. These people, left or right, they get upset by that when something happens because our society is like, we don't want consequences. We want everything to work so I can do exactly what I want to do and never have a consequence. And life doesn't work that way. Heaven doesn't work that way. As grandparents, you can be morally demanding while the world is being less demanding, and social media is pushing everyone to complain. To bring back an oldie but goodie, stop complaining or I will give you something to complain about. Which there is hope. Wall Street Journal ran an article 2 weeks ago that said, gentle parenting is out. F around and find out parenting is back. That was the title of the article. Okay, all right? And so it's basically parents going, look, when I was born, Dr. Spock's book had come out. And my mother, being a nurse, she's like, Dr. Spock's a doctor. I need to listen to him. And it said, talk to your child, talk to your child, talk to your child. And she said, then I took the book and wore out your fanny. And you were better. Okay? Because that was me. My sister, you could look at her angry. She'd burst into tears, never do it again. But me, no, that was not me. Okay? This is something you can do as retirees because you've got the time now. Okay? This is something that a couple put together. My wife and I did this for years when we were first married. We haven't done it recently because who's got the time? Okay, but basically, you get away for a weekend. The husband plans the weekend. Okay? All right? And you go someplace, and what you do the first day is you separate for half a day. Separate for half a day, okay? And you both write down, what have we done this past year that was really good? That really enjoyed. And what did happen this past year that, don't want to do that again, and that was bad. And you get together at lunch, and you share that. So it's going back and reflecting. Here's what we've done together. Here's the things that maybe we've done differently, etc. Basically, it's Top Gun Maverick and Top Gun. You know, Top Gun came out when I was 24. It reflected exactly how I felt like then. The world's my oyster. They better get out of the way. I'm going to accomplish everything. And Top Gun Maverick came out when I turned 60, and it's like, yeah, I shouldn't have done that. And I probably should have done that differently. And I'm going, you know, I feel it. Okay. But that's what this part is. And then the next part, the next day, you spend half a day apart, and you write down, here's what I'd like to do in the next year. Here's what I want to accomplish. And then you get together at lunch and you share this, and you say, okay, here's what we'll agree to together, and you make plans. This is what we're going to do. God's given us this much time. How do we do it? And so I share it with this. Our goal is this, to pass on to a younger generation that this is how to live a good life. Get married, have children, build a legacy, pass down your values, pursue the eternal, seek true joy, and eventually we'll replace the nihilists. Okay, so let me end this with a song. So, I leave you with this. My mother-in-law grew up in West Texas during the Great Depression. She lived a hard life as a young person, and she lived a good life. And I hope all that can be said for all of us. Let's pass on to young people what we have learned to help them enjoy their life further, to help them know that they can have peace in God and the like, and to go out well. And this quote you see here, that's from Charlie Kirk. Take care.